I think in all of my writing, that's the whole thing is, hey, there's a journey, there's hope, don't give up. There are plenty of things out there, whether it's, wrong relationships, addictions, things that will distract us and cause us to go further down the downward spiral. And I would just say, everyone can get back on the path. Everyone has a talent. Everyone has a calling. Let's build on that.
Welcome back to another episode on Find Joy with Joyan, the podcast that is all about helping you live and lead a life with joy. I'm your host, Joyan Chan, and every Wednesday we are giving you access to the world's best and brightest minds in their fields on our show. Listen in as these leaders impart their wisdom, inspiration, and stories to empower you to live joyfully with intention, passion, and purpose, and celebrate the struggles and overcome the challenges we may face each day with the tools and insights that we are going to share with you. Whether you are looking to improve your relationship, find your passion, learn how to embrace the present moment, deepen your spiritual connections, or learn the magic of manifestation and law of attraction to attract more abundance, this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. As your host, I am also challenging myself to dig deeper to learn and unlearn and ride along with you. We are not here to tell you how to live your life because it is your life. But this life is all that we have right now. So my friend, why not live our life to the fullest? So I hope these conversations and stories will guide and inspire you to live your life to your highest potential and a life that you are proud of as you continue to grow and evolve in your own journey. So if you are ready to start living a more passionate, purposeful, and joyful life, join us every Wednesday on Find Joy with Joyan for inspirational stories, powerful message, fun conversations, and empowering thoughts with me and my special guests and friends. And now, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. From Staten Island, New York, he started playing guitar and writing songs in his early teen years, and never for a moment has he stopped loving it. After a few years and several bands later, he released his first album, Choose This Day, in 2005. While working on some side music projects, he expanded his writing into literature and released a fantasy novel, Earth and Evermore, This Lighted Blade, in 2016. In June of 2021, in working with Taylor Mays at Iron Grove Studios, a new rock album, Into the Apocalypse, Part A, Divided and Conquered, was born with over 200k streams 10 months later after launch. And shortly after that, most recently a follow-up to Number One, Earth and Evermore, Courting Dreams, debuted. He's here today to help you find your dreams and to achieve them. So guys, help me in welcoming the accomplished musician and songwriter, the rock star, John Consalvo. Hi, John. Welcome to the show. So excited to have you here today.
I was so excited that, I don't know if I can, outdo that intro. That was amazing. Thank you.
Wow. I want to know, how did you first discover your passion for songwriting?
Great question. I was raised in a really musical family. So all of my uncles are phenomenal guitar players, drummers. My cousins, great drummers, guitar players, vocalists. My mom was a great vocalist. And so I started, singing pretty young, like around 7 years old. Um, I'd say right around 12, I started to have this thing where I wanted to create lyrics. I liked the idea of creating. And I was a bit of a late bloomer with my guitar. I picked it up, as you mentioned, in my teen years, right around 15 years old. But I would say as soon as I was around 16, I started writing songs, lyrics, and music all the time. And I just had this desire to just create and keep creating over and over. Um, I've probably written, maybe 500 songs, in my, career at least. Many of those are like, in a box someplace, but I'd love to be able to do something with all of them at some point. But I would say just this idea of creating and honing that, like it's like anything else. If I go back and look at my old lyrics when I was like 14 or 18 or 20, I might cringe a little bit and be like, really, I wrote that. And then some things you look back and you're right, and you're like, wow, I was wiser than I thought. Like so it's pretty cool. But yeah, I just have always had that, and I'd say it started probably more when I was around 12 years old and started to build over time.
Wow. So what is your music all about? Like, what do you write about actually?
Yeah, I think it depends. I number one for me, I want it to be as as real and authentic as I possibly can be. So you mentioned Choose This Day. That was my first album. That was about really a lot of in-depth personal journey and personal growth that I was going through. And I'm a believer that, if you're gonna put something down, if you're gonna put some songs you're gonna record that people are gonna hear, it should be real. It's got to be either real personal to you or real personal to something you're trying to accomplish. And so I would say, certainly, Choose This Day was personal to me. They all are, but Choose This Day was really about my journey and a lot of the things that I personally had been going through. Um, and so when I look at like Into the Apocalypse Part A and Part B, that's more of a story album, right? It's still, I think all the songs, there's 22 in all between both albums. They can stand on their own, but really, I like this idea back to creating, like we were talking about before. I like this idea of a story rock opera, right? Where you are following an individual that is, it starts in a time not dissimilar to where we are right now, um, but he's really just trying to survive through apocalyptic times, through hardship, through um, trying to achieve a calling and falling away from a calling, and really taking those steps um, to try to make something of his life during the hardest of times. And uh, almost like many of us, right? You fall away from the thing you're trying to accomplish. We all have a story arc, and then you follow this individual to where they get their journey back to their calling, in album two. And so but even then, all the songs, I draw from either personal experiences or things that I've witnessed, and to try to develop this character. um and so but yeah, everything to me starts with being personal.
That is really interesting. So, because I'm sure being a musician, it's not an easy journey, right? I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm because I'm not a musician, right? But I did have like dreams. I'm a dreamer. I did have dreams before when I was young, and I just didn't. It didn't happen. It didn't follow through. So, what would you say about what was your biggest challenge on your journey that you have faced, and how did you overcome it?
I think you're right. I think songwriting, or just musician in general, certainly has its challenges, but um uh not like anything. I don't think any different from anything else. So I would say for me, the biggest thing was prioritization. So um, when I was in Staten Island, I would say, as even when I was like, late teens into, early 20s, um, I was in rock bands that would, play in different clubs and what have you. And then I think at that point, I had a choice. For me was either continue that, but you're not making much money, right? I mean, ultimately, you're at clubs, you're selling clubs out, but they're small, and maybe you get couple $100, a night, a few nights a week, and uh, then it's like, okay, do I need to go out and get a real job, right? And like that's just the real of it, right? And so that was, I would say for me, I made a decision that, what, I want to keep my music going. I want to keep writing, but um, there were bills to pay, and I got to get a job. And so I'd say I allowed, what wound up happening is I wound up, you know, although doing well at my job, I almost put a lot of the stuff to the side. And I would say the biggest challenge is again, and now what I've made a decision to do over the past 10 years is even though I might work a full-time job or I might work at other things, um, I'm not going to let anything keep me from doing this. Whereas I say before, as you're trying to figure out what you want to do in your life, if you got bills to pay, you got to get a job, and sometimes that job takes priority over your dream and the thing you love. And so I would say the biggest challenge is number one, how do you prioritize that? And number two, if you have to prioritize a job over your songwriting or music career, but don't lose it. Keep practicing at home, keep writing, keep doing the things, save some money, pay some bills, and then get back to it. You have the gift for a reason. You have the passion for a reason. You never know what happens, right? And do a song, release a song, send some lyrics out. I mean, we're at a place now between shows like yourself and YouTube and Instagram and all the stuff where you have some folks that just write a song on an acoustic, put it on blast, and then boom, all of a sudden there's 100,000 views or followers or whatever. So I would say um, the biggest challenge for me was the prioritization. Having to choose sometimes a job over doing this, but in the world that we're in now, I think there are things that you can do to make sure that you're still getting your stuff out.
Right. I could tell that writing is really your biggest passion because you are also an author and I mean novelist, right? So what got yourself into that side of, I mean, like writing novels? Like what inspired you?
I would love to tell you that, uh, I had this passion when I was younger. I didn't. I never ever. If you told me it, you know, when I was graduating college, or when I went first going to college, I should say that, hey, one day you're going to write a book. I'd say, yeah, no, that's just not going to work out. I can't even get a term paper out, much less do a book. And so the I would say doing an album was helpful, and then doing a lot of the songs. Again, this is about the ability to create. Um, but really, it was like I want to say, for Earth and Evermore, the Light of Blade. That was the first thing I ever took a stab at writing, and it was really about this idea of creating this whole world, and where the concept really came from. And this is, um, my grandparents had both passed away in back-to-back years during May, and I was like, it was in prayer, it was during May, it was the following year, and I was really, I was missing my grandparents. I was really close with them, and and I think like a lot of folks, right? You get into this place, whether you're meditating or whether you're praying or whatever. In my case, I was praying, and one of the things I was praying about was, um, you know, uh, why do we have to deal with things like pain and death? It's not like we ever had a choice to be born, right? And that's that was my prayer, and I kind of heard this small voice within me to say, "Are you sure? What if you did have that choice? You made that choice, and you just don't know it." And then all of a sudden, like, I'm not kidding. Within seconds, like this entire world of Jardania just started to pop into my head. And I'm taking this walk in the park, and these different characters are showing up, and it's just like a little bit. And so I was like, when I get home, I'm gonna sit down, and just type it out a little bit and see what comes about. And one thing led to another, and instead of like, you know, 3, 4 pages, it wound up being a chapter. And then I was like, you know what, I think this is okay. And I reached out to um, a wordsmith editor, and she gave me some guidance, and then I wrote some more, and I wrote an entire, it was like 370 pages or something, and
Oh,
then I was like, I've never done anything like this before. Um, and then I reached out to a really well-known ghostwriter at the time, and a few other editors, and I was like, hey, I've never done this. I need to grow some thick skin. Give it to me, and tell me what's good, what's not good. But that's where it came from, and I love this idea of creating a world, creating these characters. The really, with the idea being is that you know let's say, I'm sure you felt the same way too with things in your life, but there are people you meet in your life where after like 5 seconds or 5 minutes, you just connect. You're just like, you know what, that person, I feel like I've known them a long time. And then there are other people that you might have known your entire life. right? That no matter what it is you do, they are under your skin, you're under theirs, and you just can't get there. And you're trying. It's not like they ever did anything wrong to you, right? And I'm like, I wonder if something happened, you know, beforehand. And I kind of use that as like, if we all believe that our soul, and many I shouldn't say we all, but many believe that our soul is eternal after death. Um, but what about before life on Earth, right? And this idea that not necessarily like reincarnation, but this idea that, hey, what if you as Joy and me as John were these same people as souls, 10,000 years ago, someplace else, right? And we were making choices and having relationships and building on things, and Earth is just a part of that journey moving forward. And so we get here, and that's where we have, deja vu, and that's why we have these things, right? So I just had some fun with it, and I was like, what if I could make something out of this? And that's really where it came from, just the idea to create. So I wouldn't tell you that I'm a literature master, but the idea of creating characters and creating worlds and stories is something that is appealing to me.
That is fascinating. It's so fascinating. Well, I do believe in past lives and reincarnations and souls and soulmates. I do believe that. And it's something that I am always passionate about. I talk to people, on my podcast all the time. But yeah, it's something that I wasn't expecting this is where we are going with our conversation today. So I want to know, what is your creative process like? Maybe, because initially you just wanted to write a song, but it turned into a book, right? So what is your
Hmm.
creative process like? Do you, maybe you start with meditation just to download some idea? I don't know, like, so do you start with the lyrics or melodies or a specific theme or characters? What is your process like?
Yeah. So sometimes the process can be some of my songs. I've written the lyrics first, so there are just lyrics that come to me, and I want to write them down, right? Um, Other times it's a melody, and the cool thing, and sometimes not so cool thing about a melody is you never know when it's going to hit you.
Mm.
So you might be out there shopping in a supermarket, and getting some things, and all of a sudden this cool melody just hits you in your head. And what I find myself doing is, taking my phone and hitting the record button and just quickly humming that melody into the phone so I could get back to it when I get home, right? In the old days, I guess, long when there was no phones, I don't know how folks did it, but uh, you actually had to remember it. So I would take the melody, and then other ways would be, I'll pick up my acoustic and I'll just start, strumming away, some things, and then humming a little bit and picking up a melody, and I'm like, okay. Um, just yesterday I wrote a song called Sometimes, and it's just it's something that I'm toying around with. It took me about 10 minutes to write, because the inspiration was just right there. So it's like, okay, I, I I had this music in my head, I had this melody in my head. Let me put some lyrics to it, see if it makes sense. Lay it down on a couple of versions of it just on my phone. Um, and so that's really the process. It's not very complicated. It's either going to be lyrics first, or the melody first, or you're playing around with some chords and the acoustic, and then you're just building the song from there. I would say when you get into the studio, and you mentioned Tyler Mays, you have a great producer. Tyler on these last two albums, Gary Workant from Shadow Gallery was on my first album. Um, a good producer will take what you have and try to make it as best as possible. So they might say, okay, this sounds great. This sounds great. Love this. Have you thought about tweaking this? Or maybe change this from an A to an A minor. Um, and although you don't hear it when you're writing it, when you hear it when you hear it as they're instructing you, like, oh man, that's so cool. So I think I write the main foundation, but when you get into there with the producer, they'll make a tweak here or there that just takes the song to a whole new level.
Wow. So what is your biggest inspiration? And also, okay, so I have two questions. First, what is your biggest inspiration? And second is, how do you overcome creative blocks? Have you ever gone, you face a creative blocks where you just don't feel inspired to write anything, but maybe you have to, I don't know, like maybe the deadline is near, but you just don't feel inspired to write anything.
My inspirations, I'd say, um, I'm a man of faith, so certainly my faith will play a part in my inspiration. Um, yeah, I would say, any of the experiences that I'm going through, listen, a poet needs the pain, right? So, you know, any joys I'm dealing with, any questions or doubts I'm dealing with, um, any emotional pain I'm dealing with, right? That all comes out. Like I was saying in the beginning, it's got to be real, right? You know, I believe that writers write so that readers can read. Right? But I also think with music, right? If we write songs not just for ourselves, but for someone else, right? You just don't know who that someone else is or how they're going to interpret that. But it should always be real, and the audience will, they will pick up on that. They'll know if it's fake or not, right? And so you want it to be genuine. But yeah, for me, I would say God and faith, my experiences, whether it's joy or happiness or pain, um, or, those would be, I would say, again, not overcomplicated. I'd say those would be my main inspirations there. And then what was your second question?
How do you overcome creative blocks? Like you
Oh, yeah. I, you know, I would say a couple of things. One, time. You know, there are times when I'll be writing something and I think it'll be okay, and then I'll put it down for a minute, for a day or two, or whatever, and I'll come back to it and be like, oh, that's even better, right? Um, and then when even writing the novel, I haven't been to a place to where I've been like, oh, I'm stuck. I don't know what to write. But I do think it's important to have your outline first. Um, Even when I did the album, right, I had an idea of how I wanted the story to go. Have your story outline first and sit down, write a little bit. I can't write all of it at once. So I like to write a little bit in, let that marinate a little bit, and think about, okay, I'm halfway through chapter one. This is what the characters are talking about. And then I'll go back in a week and I'll look at that and say, okay, does this still resonate? Okay. And because of that, what else is happening? And it gives, when you're working out or when you're running or you're just doing regular work or whatever, and you're thinking about your story, you start getting new ideas all the time so that when you have the time to sit down and write, you can add to it. So I've been fortunate enough to where I haven't had severe writer's block, but I've also had a method to make sure that I can't just do it all at once. I will say, during Courting Dreams, the second novel, there was a there was a point in the book to where I was worried. I was like, okay, I know where the story is going, but I don't know if we have that hook moment. And then when you're writing, especially the second book, your characters talk to you, right? Because you've already established them, right? So your characters are talking to you. And then, so there wasn't a writer's block moment, but there was almost the opposite to where when I wrote something, I was like, that's it. And I jumped up, I did like a little skip dance, and then I went back to keep writing. Uh, but I would say for me, the biggest thing is I give myself time. If I try to write it all at once, A, it won't be good. And B, I will run into writer's block. So I try to do, especially with a novel, a little bit here, a little bit there. With a song, um, I'll write the song. If I don't have the lyrics, I'll record the music and then I'll come back to it again using that same method. Let's come back next week. Let's come back week, 2 weeks. Is there something that I'm inspired to write? But that's my process.
beautiful. Yeah, that's the question because I am I have been trying is the word to write because I want to write a book. Like yeah, I want to
Oh,
publish
awesome.
a author, but it's not a novel. It's like my personal my personal story. But I want to write a book, and I only have written one page, and then I got stuck, and I just don't know where to how to take it from there. So yeah, that's why it's good to talk to other writers or authors, yeah, to get some inspiration. But maybe it's to me, I feel like maybe it's not the time for me to write and publish a book because I don't know, it's just like I don't feel like it.
Two things I'll give you that have helped me, and if they helped you, great. Number one, um, sometimes it's best to start at the end,
Ah.
right? And say, okay, this is the ending. This is, every book's got to have, even fiction, nonfiction, there's an ending. It's how you want to end the book, right? That's number one. Number two, I would just say write and write and write. And someone told me this in the beginning when I was writing Earth and Evermore, The Light of Blade. They say, write your story. And they told me after it was released. So I wish they would have told me first. But they were like, the best thing you can do is write your full novel and then start at chapter 3 and treat chapters 1 and 2 as an appendix. Because chapter 3 is when you're really getting, that most authors get into their style. All the information in chapters 1 and 2 are important, but you want the reader to be brought in like a dream. Like you're in a dream, you're always brought in right in the middle. If you think about when you're dreaming, you've never been into a dream where you start at the beginning. You're always right in the middle of something. And when you're in the middle, you know all the characters in your dream. You know everything that's happening, even though you may have never met these folks before in your life. But you know what's going on, and you're starting to figure things out. And that's supposedly how a book is supposed to go in many ways. So I would just say for you, like, number one, start at the end, just see if there's anything there. Like, how do I want to end this? And then number two, write and write. And it doesn't mean that where you're starting to write is where you're going to start the book. You may write and say, you know what? Oh, I want to start it right here. I want to start it when I was, 15. And then I'll go back to when I was 10, or I'm going to start it when I was, you know, 20 or whatever. And and then I'll go revisit it if I need to. So yeah, I would just say, try those things, see if it helps you out. That should be fun. I mean, the main character. So
My character is
that,
me.
yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That is so helpful because I never thought about start with the end, because I know exactly how I want to start, like the first sentence, like the first word of the book, but I never thought about how do I want to end this story. So that is so helpful, and thank you so much. Maybe I was just gonna start with the last chapter and the last final sentence, and then I'll just like work backwards, right? Yeah.
Maybe it helps.
Yeah, definitely. So what is really the key message that you want to, because by telling stories through your song, whether it's your book, you are able to connect with your audience, right? Or readers, your listeners, your followers. What is really the key message that you want people to take away from your music or even your stories?
Yeah, if there's one common theme, is, and it may sound cliche, but to me, it's certainly very personal. Is we're all going to go through ups and downs. We're we can't control the world around us, but we're all going to be affected by it. And so what I would say is, in all of my stuff, yes, there's going to be trials. Yes, there's going to be tribulations. Um, but there's always hope, right? And so, like, even in these last two albums, right, the part A is called Divided and Conquered, and part B is called Still Hope, right? And so, no matter what it is you're going through, I think if we're if we're faithful, if we're good to those to the left and to the right of us, um, whether that's geography, whether that's politically or whatever, if we're good to the people that are put in our path, um, and we're continuing to try to do good by others, then I think good things will happen. And so and in this case, right, because I'm more faith-based, right, to me, as we're going ahead and, my character here in the past two albums, um, he's got a calling from God. It's that he finds about when he's a kid, but he doesn't do anything with it. And he kind of walks away from it, not because he's a bad person, but just because he's distracted by the world and the pain of the world of loss. And he's fought in wars, um, he's, deceived by just the basic day to day. And if you know baseball, the difference between a home run and a foul ball is just a 16th of an inch of where it lands on the bat, right? So it just takes a little bit to be distracted. And so and one day he just gets to a place to where he's just like, you know what, almost like rock bottom. And he's like, you know what, I gotta be humble. I've been a bit arrogant. I gotta be humble. I gotta do right. And I'm gonna change my life. And then he just starts to, you know, live, what he would consider to be more honorably than he had been living before, and seek out other folks that need help. And you gather things little by little, make it grow, and ultimately he's trying to find his way back to his calling and his way back to God in this case. But I think in all of my writing, that's the whole thing is, hey, there's a journey, there's hope, don't give up. There are plenty of things out there, whether it's, wrong relationships, addictions, things that will distract us and cause us to go further down the downward spiral. And I would just say, ultimately, it's about there's still hope. Don't give up. Um, Everyone can get back on the path. Everyone has a talent. Everyone has a calling. Let's build on that.
That is beautiful. I'm almost like I'm so tempted to ask this question, like how do you find your calling? Because there are so many people, they are like so lost. They are stuck in a 9 to 5 job and they are not passionate about life. That was me in the past, like, basically. So like how do you find your calling? How do you really know what is your true purpose in life?
And you know what? I'd love to say I have that answer. I think I'd be a wealthy man if were more wealthy than I am.
Yeah.
But I do think that there I think we have something, again, it's going to sound cheesy, but I think that we have something inside of us a little bit. To whereas, like you mentioned earlier, right? Um, I first started to write lyrics when I was, 12 years old. If I went back, they probably aren't very good. Um, but I always enjoyed that. I enjoyed from the time I was a kid, I enjoyed the art of telling a story, whether it's through word or through music or through song, or, you know, even in a public crowd, if someone asked me to tell a story, I'd feel really comfortable coming up with something on the spot and telling a story. So, but for me, that's just something that was always there. Now, other people say to me, how can you do that? I could never think of doing that. I don't know how to do that. To me, it comes more naturally to me. Um, to other people, other folks, they have this innate desire to paint. They started painting a little bit when they were 5, and then 7, and then 10, and 15. I couldn't paint. I barely could paint a straight line. I know I can't even do that. Like it's just not going to work out. Uh, but I would say the passion that you have within you, the things you enjoy, even if you're like, that's so stupid, nobody else would be into that. That's okay. That's yours. Build on that, right? And so if you have a passion to sing or design or write, um, or run or whatever, there's so many folks with different passions that they've had since they were, children. Build on that. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in society today, and I always say it, is we have way too many people that were born to be painters that are electricians. And not saying you can't be a great electrician if your desire is to be a painter, but if your desire is to be a painter and you're painting for a living, then it's not feeling like work. It's your joy. If your passion is to be a painter, but you're an electrician, you had to learn that, pick up that skill, and that's great. That's honorable. But you're not going to be happy because your happiness was painting. And so I kind of look at it that way. At the same time, if you want to pick up some other skills along the way to embellish your passion, awesome, do that. But I would say every one of us has that something that we've always been passionate about, and only you know that. Only I know it for me. Only you know it for you. Um, I'd say I think the calling starts there. I don't think those passions are given to us by accident. I
Mm,
think that we have them for a reason.
yeah. Wow, I love that. That is beautiful. Yeah, that is a question that I want all my listeners to ask themselves today. What is your happiness? And so what are some of the projects that you are working on right now? I know we talk about you actually just released your second album. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so we just released Into the Apocalypse Part B, Still Hope, right? So that's the second album of this story album, where we had part A and 21, part B here. Third album overall. And I would say this album has 12 songs. They could stand alone, but if you listen to them cover to cover, um, it tells a story, right? And so, um, and it starts about a year after part A ends. And so part A ends with, as I mentioned before, with this guy um, hitting rock bottom, coming to the realization that he's got to humble himself, find his calling, and it takes off from it ends with the world in a pretty dire place, right? There's you know earthquakes and famines and all these things that are happening, and after one big catastrophic event. Um, this album starts a year later, and you're going through these 12-song journey to where he's trying to pick up the pieces of what happened to him in part A, and then just like anything else, right? Once you think you got it figured out, something else comes to hit you, and that something else comes quick, and he's kind of on the run for a few songs, and then he meets new people that he wants to build a community with, and that goes on for a few songs, and then all of a sudden, um, more chaos comes, and then ultimately to get to this pinnacle ending to where you know, he embraces his calling on at some point during this album, and then it gets to the ultimate goal at the end. Um, and so I would say the song styles, they range from like, there's almost like a country Americana on some of the songs, all the way to progressive rock, right? So it's got a pretty, you know, wide scope of songs. There's a lot of you might find a little bit of a banjo in there, a little bit of fiddle in a couple of songs, or fiddle in one song, banjo in a couple. We'll have some big guitars, big drums as well. So yeah, certainly very excited about the album.
Oh, exciting. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking your time out being here with us today and sharing so generously and answering all my questions. So we always end our show with final 5 rapid fire questions. Usually I ask my guests the same 5 questions, but I have different set of questions for you today. And every question has
Okay.
to be answered in 1 word or 1 sentence maximum. All right. First question is, what is your biggest dream?
Biggest dream?
Yeah.
Wow. Biggest dream? I would say find my calling.
Find your calling. Wow. Okay. The next question is, if you could work with anyone in the world, who would it be?
I could work with anyone in the world.
Yep.
Okay. I think right now, if I could work with anyone in the world, it would be Orianthi. Great guitar player, very humble. I took a master class of hers once, and it was phenomenal. So I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Now you put it out into the universe. It's time to manifest for the dream to come true. Right? The next question is, if you could live your life all over again, what would you do differently?
Growing up, I think when we're younger, we make decisions that often treat people poorly, and there's a couple of folks I'd like to go back and um, not have had some things happen. Like there's a couple of folks I look back and like I should have never said that to that person or whatever. I'd like to change a couple of those things.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's one of the most beautiful answers that I have received when I ask this question. The next question is, what is something you're trying to learn or curious about right now?
Yeah, I'm passionate about people, and I realize more every day that not everybody's like me, thank goodness. Uh, but how to communicate with folks, how to hear folks, everybody is different, and so I certainly want to just learn more about that.
Learn more about people. Wow. The last question is, what brings you joy?
Wow, that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I'd like to say a pepperoni pie from Danino's Tavern in Staten Island. That will usually bring me joy, no matter what the mood is. You give me good pepperoni pizza, and I'm ready to roll.
Wow. I love that. All right. Now tell my folks where they can find you online, where they can listen to you, your music. What are the, where is the best way to get to know you more?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you. The music is available in all digital platforms, so Apple, Spotify, Deezer, what have you. We also have we're also on YouTube, right? We have a couple of lyric videos that are out there as well. We'll have some more for those that want a physical copy. At the uh, right around the end of the month, end of summer, I should say, we'll have we're planning on having CDs and vinyls available for Into the Apocalypse Part A and Part B. There'll be like a double album, so that'll be cool. Um, I'm on Instagram, John underscore Consalvo. So you can find me there as well. And so, and then there's also a John Consalvo music page on Facebook. So, yeah, channel on YouTube, channel on Facebook, and then also on Instagram, and then on all the digital platforms. And for anyone that gives the music a listen, I would love, let me know if you love it. Let me know if you hate it. I'll be, grateful either way.
All right, guys. Yeah, any feedback is welcome. I hope you love this episode. Go follow John, subscribe to his YouTube channel, Apple Music, Spotify. I'll put all his links in the show note below, so make sure you go and check it out. This guy is rocking it, right? And if you want to learn more about what I do, what we do, you can go to my website as well, and also follow me on Instagram at joyan.chan. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode coming every Wednesday. And I will always leave you the same way as I leave you every other episode. Show up. The world needs you and you need you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Thank you again for tuning to Find Joy with Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can help support this podcast in one of three ways. 1. Take a screenshot of this episode and share it on your IG story and tag me at findjoyjoyan_podcast so I can repost and connect with you. 2. Share this podcast with a friend or a family member. And 3. Leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to grow and reach more listeners worldwide. Make sure you also subscribe so you don't miss out on any episode coming Wednesday. Thanks for being here, and I will see you soon in the next episode.